I'm Nicola Tallant, and you're listening to Crime World, a podcast about criminals, drugs, and the sins of the underworld. We're Ireland's top podcast for 2025, and now we've got a new website. So if you want to learn more about crime and criminals, if you want stories, extras, and podcast subscriber specials, go to www.crimeworld.com. Despite being targeted by Creswell from the age of 10 or 11, Katie Simpson was always very much her own person, her mind filled with hopes and dreams for her future. She was fearless around horses. In fact, according to her friends and family, she was something of an adrenaline junkie who lived for the hunt and planned one day to buy her own decent horse, an animal she could train, love and take care of. Long before Creswell entered the scene, Katie's home life had been tricky. Her parents' marriage was in trouble for a great many years, but Katie had a best friend she could always turn to when things got really tough at home. Chloe Scott lived nearby and went to the same school. The two girls also shared an interest in horses and competed together in small pony shows. Katie spent a lot of time at Chloe's house as a youngster, regularly staying overnight to avoid the rows at home. Her parents finally split up for good shortly after her mother Nolene fell pregnant with their fourth child, Katie's brother. It was Nolene who moved out of the family home in Tynan to the village of Middleton, about 3 miles away, where she opened up a takeaway. It may not have been the easiest of childhoods, but Katie was not one to feel sorry for herself. She loved life and has been repeatedly described as a particularly bubbly youngster who could be devious and bold but always kind. Nolene has only spoken out a couple of times about her daughter in the last few years. She told a BBC television documentary how Katie was the strongest of her 3 daughters. "My girls knew how to stick up for themselves, especially Katie, even with the boys, when she was younger playing," she told them. "Rebecca or Christina might have run in, but Katie would have held her ground. When she was younger, if her dad was working nights milking, she'd have been standing in the hall with her Wellington boots on, waiting for him so she could give him a hand. She was very good, a very good child." Katie's innate goodness and strength were something Creswell spotted as soon as he started sniffing around her older sister, Christina. Knowing how crazy she was about horses, he started getting her to help him in the stables. Nothing stood out about him in the beginning, Nolene told the BBC documentary. Nothing at all. Just how nice he appeared, how charming, and Jill Robinson too. She was older and all smiling, and you'd think if Jill was a nice girl, he couldn't be that bad because he was with her. However, other members of Katie's family weren't so enamoured with the overconfident Creswell. Katie's aunt, Colleen McConville, described him as very arrogant. "I can remember rolling my eyes at him because I couldn't stand the way he was in people's faces," she said. Some of her family members and friends have also since told her they were worried about all the time she was spending in Donegal, helping at the stables. She would return to Armagh to visit looking tired and thin, with hardly any money to show for all her hard work. We now know that Creswell was also physically abusive to both Simpson sisters. Over the space of 2 years, Katie was hospitalised 18 times with serious injuries. And each time Creswell took her for treatment, the medics were told she'd either fallen from a horse or been kicked by one. Chloe Scott and her family suspected Katie was being exploited by Creswell, but she was reluctant to confide in anyone the full extent of what was happening behind closed doors. She did escape briefly. When she was still in her mid-teens, she lied about her age and got a job at a horse yard near the town of Ayr on the southwest coast of Scotland. She spent several months there and was hugely popular, so when they discovered she was younger than she'd said, the owners allowed her to stay on. It was the only time she was allowed to hold on to her own money, and she enjoyed spending it and going out to have a pizza with her friends and finally buying herself some new clothes. But it wasn't to last. She took the ferry home at one point to see her mum and Chloe, and while she was back, Creswell and Christina arrived back in Tynan too. By the end of the week, Katie was back in Port Hall in Donegal, helping Creswell to take care of the horses. I'm Nicola Tallant, and this is Groomed, an investigative series from Crime World Presents. Episode 5, Nightmares and Dreams. It's true that Creswell had an inexplicable power over Katie and the other women he pulled round him. But Katie's spirit wasn't entirely extinguished. Thanks to Paul Lusby, we know she had a brief romance while living in Donegal. Her blossoming show-jumping career also provided an excellent outlet for meeting other like-minded people. The competition circuit is where she met Shane McCluskey, another young jockey with a promising future. The summer of 2020 proved to be a thrilling season for Katie. A tender romance began with McCluskey, with the two of them messaging each other every single day. However, while she was smitten and excited at having a brand new boyfriend, Katie also lived in serious fear of Creswell finding out about McCluskey. She told only one or two friends about him and then swore them to silence. Eventually, they arranged to spend a night together at Katie's mother's house in Middleton on the 1st of August 2020. It would prove to be the last moment of happiness that Katie experienced in her all too short life.
Going by what we've found out or what we've known, she was never allowed time to have a boyfriend, and we later learned that Shane had been quite attracted to her. But I don't know where the decision was made. I know they were not allowed, they didn't talk to each other when Johnny was about, and she didn't want him about the yard because Johnny wouldn't have it for a start. But I mean, she'd have got the blame for that. But she's 21. Is she wanting to break free? She's thinking more for herself. She's thinking, this is not my setup anymore. I'm not maybe going to put up with this anymore. And she is there is communication between her and Shane. And it's, the very fact that the lengths they had to go to meet up, get right out of both the county and get away quietly. And, okay, there's a certain element of intrigue about that, and that's good. And at that age, it's all kind of, all the secret thing. That's fine. But you got to ask why. And it all came out later on. Why? The fear of them being found together, or that they had even been communicating with each other. They couldn't go anywhere even local. It had to be taken right out of the scene. Now, it was said in court that Shane was seen leaving Armagh. He wasn't. He was seen returning home to Derry through Strabane. And the individual who saw him was suspicious and contacted Johnny. And Johnny goes, where would he be going? Katie. And he bombards her with texts. Now, Katie's up. Horse people are always up very, very, very early. She's up, he's away, and she's leaving to drive to the meadows in Lurgan. And he's on to her. And she's reading this message. Now, what I should say is, I don't really understand Snapchat and all these different things, but she would have switched that off or just deactivated that when she was out and about, because she couldn't go anywhere. There wasn't contact. Where are you? What are you doing? And it wasn't a ring job. It was constant ringing. And if she didn't answer, the abuse started. But seemingly they can track, and she would switch that off because, she used to say, it's not working. It's not working. But it wasn't. In hindsight, she switched it off to give her some privacy. But he then, they're in contact with each other, and she said, he knows. You must have been seen. And she had actually told him, go home the back roads, whichever way that would be. And apparently he didn't. He went home his usual route and was seen. And that just goes to show how intense that would be. So as Katie's driving to the meadows in Lurgan, he's ringing. And Katie has to form a defence. And she says, Shane, tell me you were still in bed. It was a mistake. It wasn't you. All the panic, even rereading those texts when they were read out in court and you made your notes. Oh, that child was terrified. And she's still having to drive to the place where she knows it's going to kick off. And immediately there, takes her phone. And she didn't volunteer it. He took her phone. I'd no right to do that. And he's scanning and scanning. She deleted everything. Shane hadn't. And that was where it came in very handy later on. But Katie, she's enjoyed herself. She's had a decent night. And that might have given her just that wee bit more confidence to push this a bit more. Let's just see where we can take this. I can do this. Because I think Katie had reached a stage where she was like like a robot. You get up, do the horses, feed, go to bed. You get up, you do the horses. All the while getting abuse flung at her and whatever was going on. So he has figured, he's trying to ring her to find out, and Johnny has maintained the phone. And he then starts to text Shane as if he's Katie. And by this point, he has Katie over the border. He's beaten her. He's given her a very hard day at the meadow. She was made to ride every single horse they had in. That was to wear her out. That was the punishment. And all the while, you have Johnny's one sitting watching. She's made Johnny angry. How dare she? Does she not realise how lucky she is? There's one photograph of Katie going over a jump, and that photograph troubles me because her wee lower lip is out. And Katie rode high. You're going over a jump, you've got to streamline, look right through over the ears. And she's riding like that. She's just all wrong. You just know she's either tired out by that point or it's not worth it, but she's trying to keep going. But her wee lip is just sitting slightly out, and I thought she's been crying or is going to cry, and the hat's pulled right down to here, and there's no joy in her. Katie was free when she was on a horse. This is not good.
This photograph's taken just before she dies.
The day that it all happened. Probably one of the last horses she rode that day. Probably the last photograph ever taken of her. And it chills me. I can't say it chills me. It makes me sad because you can see just the whole angle of her. She's not sitting right. She's not poised right. She's just plodding on and getting on with it. And I have to get this done. And when she's done all that, she's ordered into the horse lorry. And Johnny tells Rose, "You're taking Kitty's car home and leave whoever off on the way." All very, yes, Johnny, no problem, Johnny. And he puts her in the lorry and the interrogation begins. And I can just, where were you? You tell me. You will tell me. And this was going on and on and on, the whole cut to Oma. And they drop off horses at Jill's yard. And from there, they drive to Strabane, to Stacey Watling's yard, drop off some more horses. And the CCTV there showed Kitty leading horses out and doing various things. And then he leaves the lorry there and they transfer to his car. And that was the end. That's where the main damage was done. And for the next 6 hours, he's driving her around and she can't get out of the car. Same as he did with Abby. She can't get out. He's got her phone. She's got nothing. She's just her wee physical presence, and he has her phone, and he's interrogating her. They stop. She's pulled out of the car. He claims that they had sex twice, once in a wooded area, and then they go somewhere else and they had sex in the bonnet. He made out that Kitty was highly sexed, and it was what Kitty wanted. Well, after the day she'd had, that's not what she wanted. And the marks later proved it was forced sex, and he gets what he needs somewhere around, well, we're not sure about that actual time, but there was a communication from Shane, but on the back of something that Johnny sent. So they arrive back at Gortnessy, and it continues. She's chucked up into her room, and he goes in with her. The abuse continues. Rose and Kitty shared a room, but that night Rose slept on the sofa. I don't know if she was ordered to. I don't know if she chose to. Maybe it was a regular thing. Who knows? Unlikely, but who knows? And Johnny's in bed with her, where he says more sex. He's quite open about it. He told her, but yeah, we'd sex again. And he's trying to make out at this point, she had a fall. What are you having sex with her for? She's injured. She'd be in the hospital if she had a fall. No. He has sex with her allegedly 3 times at her behest. They fall asleep together. Christina gets up and leaves for work, gets up and, showers, whatever you have to do. She sees them asleep in bed together, and that's no big deal. And she then gathers herself up, leaves to go to work. But the minute she leaves, Johnny's texting Rose. Yup. This is the timeline. This is what we know. And Rose then says that she makes tea, cup for Johnny, cup for herself, and she goes up, knocks the door. Katie, because Johnny by now has moved into another room. Cup of tea for you? Yeah, I'm not going to work today. Rose leaves for work. She takes Johnny's car. The car that he has driven Katie about in the night before. Clearly, there was scientific evidence in that car of what happened on some level, because Katie was bleeding and she didn't start bleeding minutes before whatever happened. But something happened between, say, 1 o'clock and we're told 6 o'clock. Something happened and Johnny has to move quick. And again, women, Rose is saying about the cup of tea. So in other words, she spoke to Katie, which I can't make up my mind on that. I don't think so.
How long was she dead by the time the ambulance restarted her heart?
Well, we don't know. Thing is, there was some way her neck was closed over. And I've spoken to a number of experts, and I actually got contacted by a surgeon in England who's a specialist in throat. And he said, I'm available if there's anything, we're following this. And he says, So I asked him, and he said, had I heard of slow strangulation, which I had, but didn't put much stock in. And he said, that's where there has been intensive choking, usually until someone passes out. But they then release the grip and air does get in, but then the tissues begin to swell, and gradually, very gradually, less and less oxygen is getting in, and the heart is being starved, the brain is being starved. Different people have said you can't be more than a certain amount of minutes before they can restart your heart. Others have said it can be longer, but you're not going to recover. They can get a heartbeat. So I think Katie, was sliding down into a deeper coma. I think that is my theory, and it's been shot down numerous times, but I think the panic was already on. Whether or not getting help at that stage would have made any difference, I don't know. She could have been intubated, I don't know, but nobody will ever know. But whatever happened, Katie was badly injured and was gradually slipping away. I don't think it was a strangle and she dropped to the floor. I think she gradually slid, and they kind of maybe were thinking, could she come round? She might wake up. You know, you never know, because this wasn't Johnny's first rodeo. Let's be honest, Johnny had a habit of strangling. So did they possibly think there was a chance she would revive, and they hung on, and then she slides deeper and deeper? We won't know. And the only people who know one's dead, both are dead now, who know the real facts, both are gone. So he then somehow, between the two girls leaving, both for work at different times, the concoction begins. In the middle of this, he has two small children, one toddler, one baby, to deal with, to get up, to get freshened, cleaned, whatever you have to do, washed. He has to get them into the car to take them to his mother's house. Now, one small child is tricky enough. A small child and a baby who are probably half asleep and wrecking all around them. They've got to get put in the car, but he puts them in Katie's car because it's the only car left at the house. A car that he knows he's not insured for, yet Rose goes to work in his car. I think Rose, whatever way, could drive. Maybe her insurance covered her for anything, I don't know. But he was insured for his own car, okay. But he wasn't insured for Katie's. But he has no issue with Rose taking his car, leaving him the only car that's not insured. And in that car, he drives his children to his mother's and returns. Oh my God, Katie's hanging. And on the way back, another female talking to Hayley, keeping her on the phone so that he can enact the big scream when he goes into the house.
It's truly the stuff of nightmares, and looking back now with all the facts that have since come to light, it's kind of mad to think there were a lot of people who chose to believe Creswell's version of the events around how he discovered Katie hanging from the stairs. You only need to read the messages between Katie and Shane McCluskey from the day after they spent their only night together. After getting up around 5:30 a.m, Shane set off for his home in Derry. Katie texted him while he was on the road. "I'm glad you came, XXX," she wrote. He replied with a red love heart and said, "I am too, XXXX." But their joy soon turned to fear and anxiousness after Shane spotted the car of a woman he knew on the road home that morning, someone who also knew Creswell and who might guess where he'd been the night before. In the meantime, Katie was on her way to Jill Robinson's yard in Omagh. She was competing that day in Lurgan and needed to collect her horse. She travelled with Creswell to the competition and, clearly suspicious about her relationship with Shane, he quizzed her the entire journey about what she'd been up to the night before. Anytime she got a chance, she texted Shane. "Johnny's asking me where you were last night. I've said I haven't spoken to you since the show," she wrote. "He'll probably ring you to see what you're doing this morning. She must have told him she saw you this morning. What are you going to tell him?" Shane was clear in his response to her. "Katie, is it not easier just to say the truth? This makes me look really bad." But Katie was having none of it. "No way, Shane," she wrote. "He'll go crazy. Please don't. Can you not say you were still in bed at the time?" Shane was rattled. "Why would he kill you? This is crazy. Like, fuck me, you're terrified of him. It's no good," he wrote to her. "Yes, I'll say I was in bed, but he'll know I'm lying. I can't lie, never could." There were tons more messages like these between the two, with Katie growing increasingly terrified. That afternoon, Creswell contacted Shane and asked him where he'd been the night before. Against his better judgment, Shane lied and said he'd stayed at his parents' house. But Creswell was just baiting him. He knew exactly where he'd been and who he'd spent the night with, and she was going to pay for lying to him. Tanya Fowles was in a courtroom back at work after one of the COVID lockdowns when her phone began to ring. It was someone from Tynan who knew Katie well. They were distraught as they told her how Katie was fighting for her life in hospital after an apparent suicide attempt. However, it's very clear from the beginning there were several people who didn't believe a word of Creswell's elaborate story about how he'd found Katie.
Katie's in hospital and oh my God, what's happened? Thinking an accident. She's supposed to have hanged herself, but we don't believe a word of it. And the story went on. We just can't understand it. In some level of that conversation, I said, I've got to go back into court, but I'll catch up with you later. And I sort of went in, finished off what I was doing and decided I would just go straight to the house. And it was then that we were chatting and they said, there's something's not right. Why would, and all the whys and hows, and Katie would have made some kind of contact or whatever. They then said, and that man her sister's with, something not right about the way he gets on. And then she just goes, you might have heard of him. He once threatened to drown his partner in a bath of bleach. And I said, Johnny Creswell? Yes. Oh, I said, right. Thanks. That makes sense. So there was very little I could do. I had to just leave it because the tears were flying and, they were watching for the phone just in case. This is the Monday and I contacted Nuala and I said, explain what I'd heard. And Nuala immediately said, no, that's suspicious. So I didn't know how to report it. I didn't know what to do. I contacted another officer who I see regularly in court and I asked her, she's a serving officer, and she said, oh, you've got to report this. I'll start it here. And she opened a case file for me on whatever computer she was in. I don't know where she was in the country. She wasn't in Derry. And then she kept in touch with me the rest of that day and says, you've got to ring in, you've got to tell them it's no good coming from me. So the next morning I phoned Strand Road and I got a very nice officer who said, and what can you tell us? And took me through what I could. And I said, what I'm trying to get to you is this man has a propensity for strangulation. He has a previous conviction. It took them through the whole thing. It took them through the timings, the years. It's because it was all still crystal clear in my head as one of the worst cases I'd covered before. And I said, I don't get it. It's too similar. And I didn't know 1/10 of the similarities until later on. And they said it's somebody to ring me. And then the serving officer came back to me and said, did anybody phone you? I said, spoke to them this morning, they're ringing me back. And she kept on with me all week. And I said, they're not coming back to me. What am I doing wrong? Ring again. Rang again. As the days went along, it was, yes, Tanya, what is it now? And it was sighing and giving off and on. yes, I'm here, And then they were getting quite fed up. And I said to them, why are you not doing something about this? And the golden words, tell us this. How do you know so much about this man? Who's devastated, by the way. And I said, I covered him in court in 2010, 9-10. Covered him. What does that mean? And I said, I'm a reporter. I covered one of his main court cases. I also threw in that I know he's on the run. And he said, that's it. Right. He says, well, see, from now on, he said, you go through the press office. That's your channel of communication. We can't tell you anything. And I said, I'm not asking you to tell me anything. I'm asking you to do something and start looking closer to what's going on here. I said, if this child doesn't make it, you could be looking at murder. And he said I was over-dramatising. And I just thought, I'm getting nowhere here. And then I never heard a word back. Never, not one word. And it was me that informed the police that she was dead.
Katie Simpson was 21 years old when she suffered a massive cardiac arrest and died at Altnagelvin Hospital in Derry on the 10th of August 2020. It was 6 days after she'd been admitted. Her mother and her 2 sisters were at her bedside. So was Johnny Creswell. Later that day, he posted a tribute to Katie on his Facebook page. One of the best friends I could ever ask for, he wrote. One of the most talented horsewomen I ever met. Best hunting buddy in the world. Fearless in the saddle, fearless across the country. Hardest worker born. Best auntie to my 2 children. Christina Simpson, myself and the world are going to struggle without you, beautiful. We love you so much. Can't wait to see you again. While Tanya and others, including some of the medical staff who treated Katie, had suspicions, most others appeared to have believed that Creswell was exactly what he presented himself to be, a devastated friend and trainer who'd lost someone he loved dearly. People in those equestrian circles have since told how there was an immense amount of collective guilt felt about Katie's apparent suicide, that they didn't see it coming. And in the weeks and months afterwards, it was rarely spoken about in public, which undoubtedly suited Creswell down to the ground. Katie's body was released quite quickly after she died, and she was brought to her mother's house in Middleton to be waked. Creswell took charge of the entire proceedings. As friends, family and all those who'd come across Katie on the show-jumping circuit came to pay their respects, Creswell stood by her coffin for most of it. Some of those who attended later told how he made a great show of patting Katie's head, joking that it was the first time in a long time that her hair had been brushed. For the funeral itself, he ordered all those coming to wear their hunting gear in Katie's honour. Creswell, along with Rose de Montmorency Wright, was one of those to carry her coffin to the grave at St Vindic's Church in Tynan, where she now rests. Tanya was there at the funeral that day. She found it difficult to take her eyes off Creswell. Once Katie was in the ground, his attitude was let's all go up Main Street and go to the pub, she told me. He didn't drink, but it was like it was all over and done with. Finished, move on. The alarm bells were there for me, and for me it wasn't even guesswork that he had an involvement. It was a fact. I was literally there at the graveyard waiting to hear the sirens. I thought they were coming to arrest him, but nobody came and the funeral was over. But it wasn't over for Tanya. And there were others who suspected Creswell was involved in Katie's death too. At least 4 people went to the police with their concerns in the weeks after the funeral. However, it would take persuading someone on the inside to reopen the case. Tanya racked her brains. With her 30 years of reporting, there must be someone she'd come across who could help her. Thankfully, she didn't need to go too far back through her court notes to find the person she needed. You've been listening to Groomed, a Crime World Presents limited series, edited and presented by me, Nicola Tallant. Written by Jane Finnegan. Contributor and researcher, Tanya Fowles. The series producer is Ian Malini. Nasa Comiskey is assistant producer.